بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وقضى ربك أن لا تعبدوا إلا إياه وبالوالدين إحسانا وإما يبلغن عندك الكبر أحدهما أو كلاهما فلا تقل لهما أف ولا تنهرهما وقل لهما قولا كريما صدق الله العلي العظيم. Our fifth Imam, Al-Imam Muhammad al-Baqir alayhi salam, in a conversation that he has with one of his companions, one of his students, Zurara bin A'yun, he discusses the origin of disbelief and polytheism. The Imam tells him that the idea of disbelief is older than the idea of polytheism. Kufr, older than shirk. And he brings the example of Iblis. He says before Iblis became mushrik, before Iblis associated partners with Allah. Now, Iblis was a jinn who worshipped Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for thousands of years. And then he chose to associate partners with him. He didn't worship anybody else, but he associated partners in this sense, that he saw himself as powerful as God. He saw himself greater than God. He compared himself to God in matters of, for instance, guidance and leading people astray. He found himself to have the power to lead people astray, just like God has the power to guide people. The Imam tells Zurara that before polytheism, there was disbelief, kufr. The word kufr in the Arabic language means to conceal, to veil. If something is apparent and you cover it, you veil it, or you reject it, you place it away, you place it out of you, then you have performed kufr. That's the literal meaning. But the specific meaning, which we use, and which is used mostly in the Quran, is one who disbelieves in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or His signs. And the Imam refers to it as the origin, the original sin, before polytheism. It is the foundation of all evil. The Quran tells us, for instance, those who disbelieve, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا أَعْمَالُهُمْ كَسَرَابٍ بِقِيَعَةٍ يَحْسَبُهُ الظَّمْآنُ مَاءً. That those who disbelieve, their a'mal, their deeds are like a mirage. They look beautiful from the outside, the same way you see a mirage from far. A person who's in the desert, who's thirsty, he sees a mirage from far, he thinks there's water, he goes there and he finds that it is empty. There's nothing there. God says that that person who does not believe, that's how his deeds are. Why? Because his foundation is not there. Everything else comes from the foundation. If you have a foundation of disbelief, then nothing matters. Whatever you do, it does not matter. But if you have a foundation of obedience and belief, then that's when everything else is accepted. Now the word kufr in the Quran is used loosely, just like the word shirk is also used loosely. And that's one of the wonders of the Arabic language, is that you can take a word and not only use it in its literal meaning, but also in its figurative meanings as well. Shirk, for instance, when you ask what is shirk, Shirk, the literal meaning, which is used in the Quran, is polytheism, associating anything with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But that term is loosely used. Anyone who associates anything with Allah. See, as a Muslim, your goal, your mission is to seek happiness through obeying Allah. And there may be obstacles on the way. One of those obstacles is shirk. So Islam tells us to seek the path to Allah and clear that path of any obstacles, anything which may stand in your way. And that's why shirk is condemned no matter how big it is or how small it is. I'll give you an example. When you look at our ahadith, the ahadith mention very minute, small forms of shirk, polytheism, establishing partners with Allah. Now, when you look at these acts, they may not seem as if though you are establishing partners with Allah, but they are polytheism on a very, very minute scale. I'll give you an example. Something very, very small. One hadith implies that if you turn your ring on the inside in order to remind yourself of something, you're leaving, say you're leaving to the store and you want to purchase something, you turn your ring on the inside so that when you get there, you remember to purchase that thing. It refers to this, turning your ring inside, as a form of shirk. Now, although it's not haram, you're allowed to do it. And it's not even makruh. But these ahadith are meant to train us to think only of Allah. Depend on nothing else. Depend on nothing but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And anything which falls within the path of worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Don't depend on objects. Don't depend on materials. Depend only on Him. So the word shirk is loosely used to describe many things. Likewise, the word kufr. Kufr is a term which is loosely used to describe the following things. A person who does not perform the Hajj and has the ability to perform it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَلِلَّهِ عَلَى النَّاسِ حِجُّ الْبَيْتِ مَنِ اسْتَطَاعَ إِلَيْهِ سَبِيلًا وَمَنْ كَفَرَ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ غَنِيٌّ عَنِ الْعَالَمِينَ. The Hajj is obligatory upon those who are able to. They have the money, they have the wealth, they have the health, they have the time, they have the means to travel. It's all there, the entire package is there. It is upon them. وَلِلَّهِ عَلَى النَّاسِ, meaning Allah places it upon people, this obligation to perform the Hajj. And then He says, he who does not, وَمَنْ كَفَرَ. Kafar means to disbelieve. So why is God saying disbelief? A person who does not perform the Hajj, why? This goes back to the first meaning of kufr, the literal meaning, which is to conceal. And because Hajj is a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he who has that blessing in front of him and conceals it, he is performing kufr. He is performing disbelief. And there are many of these examples in the Quran. But in order to understand how the word is loosely described, we say this, that there's a difference between using a name and using an attribute. I'll give you a few examples. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the story of those who plotted against the Prophet Isa alayhi salam, and the Prophet Muhammad, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Now remember, there came time when the polytheists of Mecca, they didn't want the Prophet anymore. So they planned to execute him. They all got together, and the shaitan came in the form of a man, and he sat among them. And they all began thinking, what should we do to get rid of this man? We've had enough of him. Some said, let's send him out. Let's send him out. We'll put him on a camel, we'll tie his hands and his feet, and we'll send him out so he won't cause any more inconvenience. So what happened was another man suggested that if you send him out, he's going to find people who are going to find him, they're going to fall in love with him, they're going to support him, and then he's going to come back and take revenge. One of them suggested, okay, instead of that, let's trap him in a room, and we won't let Banu Hashim come and free him. We'll keep him there until he dies. Another man objected and said, no, that's not a viable option. Let's not do this. Now the man who came in the form of shaitan, or shaitan who came in the form of man, he suggested, let us assassinate him. So what they did was that they said that we're going to send an assassin to the Prophet and we're going to have him killed. And we're going to send a group of assassins, one from each family. So that Banu Hashim, they cannot retaliate. If they want to retaliate, seek revenge, they can't seek revenge against all of us. They can't go to war with all of us. So they'll be forced to accept, we'll compensate them, we'll give them money, and they'll be forced to accept the compensation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about these people, وَيَمْكُرُونَ وَيَمْكُرُ اللَّهُ وَاللَّهُ خَيْرُ الْمَاكِرِينَ. Or وَمَكَرُوا وَمَكَرُ اللَّهُ وَاللَّهُ خَيْرُ الْمَاكِرِينَ. The same thing happens with Isa ibn Maryam. The people who decided to give him up to the Romans in order to assassinate him. God says that these people calculated in a deceitful manner, and we also calculate. وَيَمْكُرُونَ. The word makr means what? Means to calculate, but in a deceitful way. Or to plan, but in a deceitful way. It's got a negative connotation. Allah says, وَيَمْكُرُونَ وَيَمْكُرُ اللَّهُ. That Allah also plans. The word makr, remember, has a negative connotation. Allah is referring to Himself as makir. A makir is a con artist. If you call someone makir, you're insulting him. You're saying you're a con artist. You're deceitful. You're sneaky. But Allah is placing that attribute on Himself. وَيَمْكُرُونَ وَيَمْكُرُ اللَّهُ وَاللَّهُ خَيْرُ الْمَاكِرِينَ. And He is the greatest of planners. But in order to understand the essence of this attribute, just like kufr, we need to make a distinction between the name and the attribute. Now Allah refers to Himself as makir. If we raise our hands in dua right now, can we say, Ya Allah, Ya Ghani, Ya Hamid, Ya Makir? Is this allowed? No, it's not allowed. Because this isn't one of His names. I'll give you another example. In Surah Al-Waqi'ah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَأَنْتُمْ تَزْرَعُونَ أَمْ نَحْنُ الزَّارِعُونَ. Do you plant these trees and these plants? Are the human beings the ones that have planted them? Or are we, God speaks of Himself, are we the ones who planted? أَأَنْتُمْ تَزْرَعُونَهُ أَمْ نَحْنُ الزَّارِعُونَ. God is saying that we are the ones that planted. Can a person say, Ya Allah, Ya Zari'? No. Because this isn't one of the names. This is only an attribute. Likewise, when it comes to the Quran, the word kufr is sometimes used as a name and sometimes used as an attribute. Those who reject performing the Hajj, they are not kafir by name. You don't all of a sudden exit Islam by not performing the Hajj. But that attribute is given to you. Likewise, when you find, when Isa ibn Maryam is mentioned in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells him, وَتُحْيِي الْمَوْتَى بِإِذْنِي. That you bring life to the dead people with my permission, with my grace. Can a person refer to Isa ibn Maryam right now as Muhyi al-Mawta? No, because this is an attribute which is exclusive to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there's a difference between the name and between the attribute. Now that we have established this, we come to this fact that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks of establishing a family in the Quran, and those who reject to do so, He says, أَفَبِالْبَاطِلِ يُؤْمِنُونَ وَبِنِعْمَةِ اللَّهِ هُمْ يَكْفُرُونَ. That do they take that which is batil, that which is void, and they neglect it, they reject it completely, and they replace the good with the evil? What does this mean? In another verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this concept as well. Musa says to his people, أَتَسْتَبْدِلُونَ الَّذِي هُوَ أَدْنَى بِالَّذِي هُوَ خَيْرٌ. Do you trade that which is of lower value for that which is of greater value? Imagine right now you walk into the Apple store and you give them the iPhone 5. You say, I don't want this. Give me an iPhone 4. The camera for this is too good for me. I want something of lesser value. Or the processor is too quick. Or it's too bright of a screen. Or the battery lasts too long for me. Would that make sense? to give up something of good value for something of lesser value? The Quran says some people give up something of good value and replace it with something of lesser value. When it comes to family, and this is the point that I want to make. When it comes to the family, some people choose to replace family, which is a correct object of love, with something of lesser value. Right? And this is something which is acceptable. This is a trend here. Living in these countries, you find that some people, for instance, they neglect their family, their wives, or their husbands, or their children, or their grandchildren, and they replace it with something like a pet. Right? Some people, they live alone. They have no family, or they have a family, but they've neglected them. They keep a pet in the home. Why? Because the philosophy behind it is that that pet can't hurt you. A husband can hurt you, a wife can hurt you, a child can hurt you, betray you, but the pet is loyal, it'll sleep with you on the bed, and it won't bite you or whatever. But that is a twisted mentality. Allah has given you something of high value, and that's the family. Do you replace it with something which is low value? And He refers to that as kufr. Disbelief. To replace something of high value with something of low value. أَفَبِالْبَاطِلِ يُؤْمِنُونَ وَبِنِعْمَةِ اللَّهِ هُمْ يَكْفُرُونَ. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran in Surah Al-Isra, وَقَضَى رَبُّكَ أَن لَا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. God has decreed that you worship none but Him, and that you are benevolent, you are good towards your parents. See, God has created the benevolence, the good attitude you have towards your parents, the respect. He has made it tantamount, meaning equal to worshipping Him. قَضَى رَبُّكَ أَن لَا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ. You worship none but Him. وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. Meaning these two things come together. Right? Believing in your Lord is something which is inside your heart. Nobody can look at you and point and say, oh, you look like you don't believe in God. You could tell them, well, I believe in God. It's something which is in my heart. But God is telling us that that belief that is in your heart has to be translated into actions. That enthusiasm, that love that you have in your heart has to be translated into actions. And according to this verse, the best way to do so is to honor and respect your parents. See, when you go and watch a sports game, when you go to the arena, football or soccer or hockey, you're cheering for the team that you love, right? What's the team here in Ottawa? Is there a team? Are there any teams? In Vancouver, they have the Canucks. What do they have here? The Senators, all right? Is anybody a Senators fan? If you're a Senators fan, when you go and watch the game and you're enthusiastic, what do? You wear their colors, right? You wear the jersey. What's the philosophy behind that? You have love and enthusiasm in your heart for this team. You're cheering them on. You want to show everybody, so you wear the colors. Allah is telling us, show your colors of Iman through what? Not by wearing a jersey that says dad or mom on it, but respect them. Be benevolent towards them. That's exactly what God is telling us. That's how you show, that's how you prove that you're worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through your parents. And that's the best way. To honor your parents. And we have the best examples in front of us, and that is Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. Ahlul Bayt, all of our morals. You know when there's a moral code? All of our morals come from Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. And I truly feel sorry for those who do not have Ahlul Bayt as their examples. Because they manifested the word of God through their actions, through their deeds. This was Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. Your parents are a blessing. You know when you go to an event and you get a backstage pass, right? A concert. Hopefully none of you go to concerts. But people go to concerts and they want a backstage pass in order to meet the band, right? That's a privilege. That's something which is special. Your backstage pass to heaven is honoring your parents. That's the quickest way to get into heaven. And you have the best examples. وَقَضَى رَبُّكَ أَن لَا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا إِمَّا يَبْلُغَنَّ. This is what he says. إِمَّا يَبْلُغَنَّكَ الْكِبَرَ أَحَدُهُمَا أَوْ كِلَاهُمَا فَلَا تَقُلْ لَهُمَا أُفٍّ وَلَا تَنْهَرْهُمَا. If one of them reaches an old age, or both of them reach an old age, إِمَّا يَبْلُغَنَّ عِنْدَكَ الْكِبَرَ أَحَدُهُمَا أَوْ كِلَاهُمَا. The first thing, وَلَا تَقُلْ لَهُمْ فَلَا تَقُلْ لَهُمَا أُفٍّ. Do not say uff, meaning do not sigh. Sometimes your parent tells you something, clean your room, do this, and you're just like that. That is the exact same as uff in the Quran. In Arabic, people who are raised, they say uff, like it's a sigh. Don't say that. That's the first thing he's telling you is do not say that. Hold it back. Sometimes don't even let it come out. Hold it back. فَلَا تَقُلْ لَهُمَا أُفٍّ وَلَا تَنْهَرْهُمَا. Do not be mean to them. وَقُلْ لَهُمَا قَوْلًا كَرِيمًا. Say beautiful words to them. Smile in the face of your parents. You don't know how much value that has, smiling in the face. How much reward a person is given. The person who smiles in the face of his father or mother is promised heaven. He is promised so much reward. Being good to our parents. One day a man comes to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And a lot of people would, of course, naturally as the case, they would seek advice from the Prophet. He told him, Ya Rasulullah, what is my obligation towards my father? How can I pay him back? He tells him that the best way you can pay your father back is to honor him and obey his commands for as long as he lives. That's the first thing you can do. Then he tells him, well, Ya Rasulullah, what about my mother? Rasulullah tells him, there's no answer for that. Whatever I tell you right now, tell you do this, that, it's not enough. It's not enough. Honor our parents. See, sometimes, especially younger generations which are raised in these countries where the older generations, the fathers, the mothers, they come from other countries, they think that there's a tendency that, my father just doesn't understand. My mother just doesn't understand, They might not understand what YOLO and swag means, They're just in a different world. Well, guess what? Your parents, they might not understand the terminology that you use, the clothes that you wear, the colors that you wear, what you watch on TV, what's cool and what's not. But remember, no matter how superior you think you are to your parents, your very existence depends on them. So don't be arrogant about it. And this was the mistake of shaitan. أَبَى وَاسْتَكْبَرْ وَكَانَ مِنَ الْكَافِرِينَ. That he saw himself as superior. Istakbar, he saw himself as great, superior. وَكَانَ مِنَ الْكَافِرِينَ. And that's what led him to disbelief. So Allah equates honoring your parents with belief and disobeying them with disbelief. Musa alayhi salam, when he asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to show him his partner in heaven, who did God lead him to? He led him to a young man, his partner, a young man who was a butcher. So he followed him and he saw that he was going about his daily business. He didn't want to interrupt him, so he waited. He saw that this man had nothing special, wasn't doing anything out of the ordinary. He was just a regular butcher. So he waited for him to finish. And he noticed that at the end of the day, whatever meat he had left behind, he wrapped it up and he took it home with him. So he followed the man. He met him at the door of his house and he introduced himself and he said, I want to be your guest for the night. He was saying this to the young man. He wants to study him. What's so special about this guy? How is he going to be my partner in heaven? So he enters the home and he notices this man doesn't have a family, he doesn't have a wife or children or siblings. All he has is an old mother in the house. And so he allows Musa in, he tells him, wait in the room for me, I have some things to take care of. He goes to his mother, that's the first thing he does. He cooks for her from the meat that he has. He cleans her. He feeds her with his own hand. He takes care of her, and then he puts her to sleep. So Musa notices that as he's putting his mother, this young man's putting his mother to sleep, he comes close to his mother and she whispers something in his ear. So after he's done with the business with his mother, he comes back to tend to his guest, Musa. And so Musa asks him, he says, what's your routine? What's your secret? He tells him, nothing, I'm just a normal butcher. But this is my daily routine. I take care of my customers, and then whatever meat I have left, I bring home. I prepare it for my mother. I feed her. I clothe her. I take care of her. And then every night, Musa asked him, well, what does she whisper in your ear? He says, every night after I do this, she comes to me and she whispers to me, my son, may Allah make you the partner of Musa in heaven. And Allah answers the call of this elderly woman. Nothing special about her and nothing special about him. The only thing is that he takes care of his mother. So you have a responsibility tonight. If you're a child, if you're a son or daughter, go to your mother tonight. Your father, but especially your mother, both of them. Especially your mother. Tell her, I want you to pray for me. Just pray for me once. And if you're a mother or a father, tonight, without your child asking for you, pray for them. I know parents already do, but with the blessing of the month of Ramadan and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala listens to our supplications, do so. Just try it once. This is Musa. You look at our Prophet, one day a man comes to him during the Hajj season and he tells him, Ya Rasulullah, I performed tawaf and I performed the sa'i, I performed the rites of Hajj. If any of you have been to Hajj, and inshallah you will go to Hajj, you'll see how much physical strength it requires just to perform the basic rites. He said, I did all of these and I carried my mother on my back the whole time. He says, have I given her back? Have I paid her back for what she has blessed me with? The Prophet tells him, he says, you haven't even paid her back for the pain she went through when she was giving birth to you. Let alone the pain she went through before and the pain she went through after and the sleepless nights. So no matter how much we honor our parents, it's not enough. And don't ever take them for granted. There are people, you can ask them right now, their parents are no longer with them. And they wish every day that their parents were with them. They're a blessing. Some people, and these aren't normal people, these are extraordinary people. I'm talking about scholars. I'm talking about professors, authors, wealthy people, businessmen. A lot of them, if you ask them, and I've asked them, what's the secret to your success? Scholars, you ask them, what's the secret to your success? They won't tell you it's the amount of books I wrote, or the sleepless nights that I had, or the amount of books that I read. They'll tell you it was because I was at service to my parents. I know them personally. Success doesn't come from making money or reading books or doing this or that. It comes from these things. It comes from the things which Allah has made tantamount, equal to His belief. وَقَضَى رَبُّكَ أَنْ لَا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّهُ وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. Benevolence, greatness. He tells us in another verse, even if they order you to worship other than Allah, even if they order you to disbelieve, even if they order you to do haram, and this happens, I've seen this. I've seen this where a child is a believer and unfortunately one or both of the parents discourages them. Tells them, you don't need to pray right now. You don't need to perform the Hajj right now. You're only 20 years old. You can perform it when you're a geezer, when you're 60 years old. When you go to Hajj, that's the problem. When you go to Hajj, about 95, I would say, 95% of the people are over the age of 40. You don't find a lot of young people in Hajj. That's because we have a twisted mentality, is save it for last. No, save it for first. Do it once you're young. And some parents, even religious parents, they say, no, you're too young. Why? The Quran tells us that if they tell you to disbelieve and do wrong, then turn away from them. You have the right to disobey them, but only with that. You still have to respect them. You still have to be good towards them. If your father tells you to disobey, you can't get up and punch him in the mouth. You tell him, no, Father, I am going to obey as Allah has ordered me. You decline respectfully. But you maintain that respect for your parents. Look at our fourth Imam, Al-Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam. Such a great man. I mean, this man embodied and manifested morals. And he lived such a great life. His mother, when she gave birth to him, she passed away soon after, his biological mother, after she gave birth to him. So he was placed in the care of a nurse, a nanny, basically. She was raising him since the days of infancy and throughout his childhood. And it is said that he never sat with this woman at the same table and ate. So one day his companions, they asked him, they said, Ya ibn Rasulullah, why don't you sit with this woman? She raised you from when you were an infant, toddler, a child. He said the reason, listen to this, he said the reason, and this wasn't his biological mother. The reason is because if I sit at a table with her, I am afraid that I will want to pick something off the table which she has looked at first. And I'm afraid by doing so, I'm going to offend her. I'm going to displease her. Imagine. This is how he dealt with his mother. And she wasn't even his biological mother. So how do you think he would have dealt with his biological mother? Do we place our parents' priorities in front of us when we sit at a table? You know, children these days, they're called to dinner. They run downstairs. They snatch the food off the table. And they don't even sit at the table with their parents. They run back upstairs and they play their video games. That's the kind of environment. That's what you see on TV and in the movies, right? That's exactly how it is. But Islam teaches us, and the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, even when it comes to food, something very normal, very basic, don't place yourself in front of your parents. Allow your parents to do so first. This is Islam. When you have a blessing like this, أَفَبِالْبَاطِلِ يُؤْمِنُونَ. This is why God asks, أَفَبِالْبَاطِلِ يُؤْمِنُونَ وَبِنِعْمَةِ اللَّهِ هُمْ يَكْفُرُونَ. That do they disbelieve in the blessings of Allah, and that is family, the parents, and they replace it with something else? Don't replace anything. Don't replace your parents with anything. You may have friends in this life, and I'll give you a piece of advice. Don't ever place your friend's desire and their happiness before your parents' desire. Because although he's your friend, and he listens to you, and he understands you, and you might share secrets with him that you don't share with your parents, but your friend didn't carry you in himself for 9 months. Your friend didn't give birth to you. Your friend didn't spend his time and his energy and his efforts before his money, let alone the money, to raise you. Don't replace your parents. This is what the Quran tells us. That's a twisted mentality. When you replace your parents with a friend, when you replace your parents with a pet, when you replace your parents with a boyfriend or a girlfriend, this happens. And this is what a lot of Muslim youth are doing today, is that he goes after his girlfriend and he forgets about what his mother says. Or she goes and gets a boyfriend and forgets about what her father says. Kufr. Allah is saying that this is kufr. This is disbelief. No matter how much you say, I believe in Allah, but I'm not going to listen to my parents. They're of a different generation. They're born in a different country, raised in a different time. Allah is saying that is kufr, that is disbelief. And these are the clear verses of the Quran. Be a good son and be a good daughter and honor your parents. Like the way Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam did. Place their parents in front of everything. Ali al-Akbar, the son of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. It is said that on the way to Karbala, one day, while they were on the way to Karbala, that a conversation took place between Imam Hussein and Ali al-Akbar. And Ali al-Akbar, he never asked his father, Father, why are we doing this? Why are we going and fighting these people? He never said, let's sit in Medina and just accept the allegiance of you. Not once did he question his father. Even on the battlefield, he never questioned his father. Not once did he question his father. Read about his history. Such a great man, the man who, according to the words of his own father, Imam Hussein, he says, أَشْبَهُ النَّاسِ خَلْقًا وَخُلْقًا وَمَنْطِقًا بِرَسُولِ اللَّهِ. The most similar person to the Prophet. If you want to see the Prophet, look at Ali al-Akbar. Look at how he spoke, how he presented himself, his logic, his way of thinking. His akhlaq, his morals come straight from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So this conversation takes place between the father and the son. And the father, Imam Hussein, he asks his son. He says, what do you think about our situation? And the son tells him, my dear father, أَوَلَسْنَا عَلَى الْحَقِّ. Aren't we on the path of righteousness? Aren't we on the path of truth? His father, Imam Hussein, says, Bala. So look at what he replies. He says, إِذَنْ لَا نُبَالِي وَقَعْنَا عَلَى الْمَوْتِ أَمْ وَقَعَ الْمَوْتُ عَلَيْنَا. He says, as long as I am on the path of God, as long as I am obeying my father, then I shall not heed. I don't care if death falls on me or I fall upon death. Look at this attitude of a champion, this winning attitude. He placed the matters of his father before his own. This is Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. وَقَضَى رَبُّكَ أَنْ لَا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا إِمَّا يَبْلُغَنَّ عِنْدَكَ الْكِبَرَ أَحَدُهُمَا أَوْ كِلَاهُمَا فَلَا تَقُلْ لَهُمَا أُفٍّ وَلَا تَنْهَرْهُمَا وَقُلْ لَهُمَا قَوْلًا كَرِيمًا. The most beautiful thing you can do, and the beautiful way that Allah ends this verse in the Quran, Surah Al-Isra, He says, وَقُلْ لَهُمَا قَوْلًا كَرِيمًا. Say that which is generous, say that which is good and benevolent. Your father or your mother, they don't want money from you. Okay? They're the ones that are raising you. They're the ones who think about your financial well-being. They don't want you to purchase them a house. They don't want you to purchase them a car. There are some people that do that, and this kind of attitude this kind of behavior is encouraged in this country. Is that the son, he gets older, and then I'll buy my dad a house or him a car. That's not what your dad wants from you. وَقَلْ لَهُمَا قَوْلًا كَرِيمًا. That's it. As long as you speak nicely to them. When you speak to your father, address him as if he is your father. I've seen young Muslims, unfortunately, speak to their fathers, and when they call upon them by their first names. That's not the akhlaq, that's not the morals that Islam taught us. Don't say hey or call the father by his first name or any names. That's not what Islam taught us. Islam taught us to say to them, وَقُلْ لَهُمَا قَوْلًا كَرِيمًا. That's all your parent requires from you. You just speak to them in a benevolent manner. And I end by saying this, that anything you give to your parents today from generosity and benevolence, all of that will come back to you. Remember that. And take this opportunity, the month of Ramadan, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to fix things between you and your parents, to allow you to honor your parents and be among those who are benevolent to their parents. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات تابع بيننا وبينهم بالخيرات إنك مجيب الدعوات إنك قاضي الحاجات إنك على كل شيء قدير برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين.
اللهم صل على محمد